Just a few short months ago, I did an in-depth analysis on many randomized controlled trials on vitamin K2's effectiveness in combating arterial plaque. Now, a bigger, more robust trial just released looking at the impact that vitamin K2 supplementation has on the calcification in our arteries. And the results may strengthen some of my thoughts on vitamin K and arterial calcification. When you develop atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, you're developing plaque in your arteries. Now, the makeup of that plaque can fall in three categories: soft, mixed, and calcified or hard plaque. Now, calcified plaque is, as the name implies, filled with calcium deposits known as hydroxyapatite. And that's released by nearby cells like smooth muscle cells in the artery wall. Now, the idea is that there's an enzyme called the matrix GLA protein. It chose its name at birth and went wild. And this matrix GLA protein, MGP in the streets, works by locking onto this hydroxyapatite and inhibiting it from forming into crystals in our arteries. Now, vitamin K plays a role here because it activates MGP through molecular modifications called carboxylation. The big point here being that vitamin K activates this enzyme MGP in our arteries, thereby inhibiting the arterial calcification. The same arterial calcification that gets picked up on a coronary artery calcium test, CAC test. More pertinent to you, a higher CAC score, remember that's more calcification in the arteries, is associated with more cardiovascular disease, more heart attacks, for example. So it stands to reason that we may want to reduce our artery calcification. Now, I'll mention here that there's an especially important point to be made on that reasoning, which we'll get to, but let's move forward with that reasoning for now. Anyway, in my past analysis, which included many studies, I was not thoroughly convinced of vitamin K2's direct impact on calcification because many studies indicated some slowing of arterial calcification, and many studies showed the exact opposite. The type of vitamin K2 used was typically the same, MK7, which is the same one that's used in this new study. However, there were issues with some of the previous studies. For example, most of the ineffective studies used doses below 200 micrograms, or they looked at the supplementation in people who were, well, not at high risk of cardiovascular disease. This new study, aside from being among the largest studies, which increases the amount of data that we have, used a typically higher dose, investigated in higher risk populations, people with symptomatic coronary artery disease, and already had some artery calcification. And crucially, the study lasted for 2 years, which is longer than many other studies. Well, let's get to it. Here are the results from this recent study. The higher the lines go, the more calcification is occurring in the arteries. The yellow is the placebo group, the group not given vitamin K2, and the other line, whatever color that is the vitamin K2 group. Clearly, there's a reduction in calcification in the vitamin K2 group. That means that this study clearly shows vitamin K2 MK7 supplementation reduces calcification in the arteries. Now, here's the thing. One of the critical questions that we should always ask ourselves: what impact does the intervention, in this case vitamin K2, have on actual cardiovascular disease outcomes like heart attacks? Sure, we discussed how coronary artery calcium tracks with more cardiovascular disease outcomes, but that's failing to consider a few critical points. Before I touch on those, if you're looking for more on the topic, I have a more detailed analysis that I created, meaning a longer, more detailed video including vitamin K2 and vitamin D3 pairing, and more on the actual cardiovascular outcomes in relation to vitamin K. That's all available as a Physio Insider, my premium research platform. I also offer reputable sources, though I don't sell them, in my master supplement guide if you are interested. Plus, you get all these perks right here, like a weekly article, monthly podcasts, and more. Check out the insiders using the link in the description. Now, one, it is generally recognized that calcified plaque is more stable than other forms of arterial plaque, like the two that I mentioned earlier, soft and mixed plaques. So if that's the case, why would reducing this calcification process be a good thing? It wouldn't. That may seem like it flies in face of the research indicating that more risk with greater calcification, but it doesn't, because that research was comparing against lower calcification scores alone. It was not taking into consideration the amount of soft plaque. Said differently, a person can have more calcification and more soft plaque because they're further along in their cardiovascular disease. That is a different scenario than comparing two people, one person with more soft plaque and one with more calcified plaque. Generally, the person with more soft plaque would be at higher risk. So secondly, this brings us back to this study. Soft plaque was not measured. That means it is possible that these people had less calcified plaque, but more soft plaque as a result of that failed calcification. Or in a more optimistic scenario, both were reduced, but we simply measured calcification. This study did not measure outcomes because it wasn't designed to measure those outcomes. Within the study itself, it seems the safety profile was pretty good, no major issues. So, knowing all that, while this study is better on several fronts, it still only lightly shifts the conclusions on a vitamin K2, MK7, on arterial calcification. The evidence is still quite mixed. I may feel a bit more confident. Vitamin K2 supplementation slows the calcification of the arteries in high-risk individuals, meaning people with known plaque-related cardiovascular disease, but I would not feel confident that reduced calcification is necessarily a good thing until I see better evidence. You may feel differently. To summarize my perspective on the larger analysis for vitamin K2 and cardiovascular disease, I lean towards benefit, but the evidence is still on shaky ground. The evidence tends to be a smidge stronger at doses of vitamin K2 MK7 above 200 micrograms per day for people with known plaque-related cardiovascular disease with long-term intake, years, not months. The benefit is also quite mild. As usual, better quality data is needed. I'd really like to see large randomized control trials looking at vitamin K2 and actual cardiovascular disease outcomes. That would tell us a lot. Until then, you can check out more on vitamin K2's benefits right here. Otherwise, check this sucker out. Thanks for tuning in. I'll hope to have the pleasure of speaking with you in the next one. Bye.